Okay, welcome to week 6, everyone. We're getting close to the end, just week 6, week 7, week 8, so 3 weeks left to go. We're more than halfway through. You guys are doing great. I'm really proud of this class. There's been some really interesting conversations going on in the discussion boards. And speaking of discussion boards, those are graded from last week as well as your collage assignment. So make sure that you go and take a look at those. Your quizzes, of course, as well are graded. Those kind of pop up automatically. So you should be able to see your quiz grades right after you've submitted them. So make sure that you're checking in on that. Make sure you're reading any feedback there. Some interesting points about Hannah Hawk. I'm always interested that students seem to think that her work is a little bit irrelevant today because it's not fast-paced enough. It's a little too complex, a little too chaotic. And I think that's a really interesting and valid point. But we have to ask ourselves, is that a good thing? Is it a good thing that we are so used to in 2015 such quick media that our attention span is so short that we have to have things kind of in your face, very direct? Is there something to say about complexity and about taking time to really, take a moment and understand something and look a little bit deeper and step back and not be using digital media and be using kind of, that more handmade approach? It's an interesting conversation to be had. So I just thought it was interesting that so many of you had that to say, that her work seemed a little bit irrelevant. Really nice job on the collages overall. Overall, I would have liked to see a little more influence from Hawk's style, like I said last week, but some really interesting topics brought up, and I think you really could see how, using this technique can be really effective in conveying a message. Okay, this week, you're not reading in either of your textbooks. You are reading from this link. It's by a man named Michel Foucault, and it's an essay called Of Other Spaces. It's actually from an interview and lecture slash lecture that he did. This is probably, I'm just going to tell you now, the hardest thing that you will read all session. Students, tend to get a little bit overwhelmed. Don't worry about it. Foucault is not easy by any means to understand, but I debated about assigning this when I designed the class, and I think that it's worth it. Just because something is difficult doesn't mean we shouldn't go ahead and engage with it, and I guarantee you will get something out of it. If, as you're reading this, you're just really struggling to get through something, please let me know and say, hey, I'm on this section and I'm not really sure what he's trying to communicate. Can you help me out here? And I've also included a PDF lecture that accompanies the reading, so you might want to pull that up and have those side by side and kind of go through them together at the same time. That might, when you open this link, it's going to have side by side the French and the English, so it's going to look a lot longer than it is because it's kind of in a narrow column. It's not terribly long. Obviously, you're reading the English side only. And so again, let me know if you have any questions regarding Foucault and his whole concept of heterotopias. And you're probably wondering, what on earth is a heterotopia? He's going to go through that, and it's very much a theory about time and space, this idea of space and how we use space, because we're talking about the environment this week. And so along with this idea of how we break up different spaces, how we use them, that space is not necessarily always physical, sometimes it's mental space. That the way we design spaces depends on their use and their function in society and how that function changes. So it's a really interesting read, and I think that you can get a lot out of it if you kind of just focus in on it. It may take a couple times to get through it. Okay, your create assignment this week is you're going to make some earth sculptures. So you have to get outside this week. Hopefully it's not terribly hot in California anymore. Hopefully it's starting to maybe cool off a little bit and you can get out in the natural world, get out from behind your computer. This is kind of a break from all that. So this gives you the opportunity to create your own original earth sculptures in the style of artist Andy Goldsworthy. So last week we were emulating Hannah Hawk. This week we're emulating Goldsworthy. And I want you to view this, this clip. It's about 25 minutes, so not terribly long. I used to have the full 1 hour documentary in here, and I gave you the shortened version. But Andy Goldsworthy, amazing artist from the UK. He uses all natural materials, and his work is just beautiful. And hearing him talk about it, it's quite a cool thing. And you might watch it and think, okay, anyone could do that, or, things might seem simple. And then when you actually get out and do it, it tends to give students a little bit more of a respect for artists like Goldsworthy. So this is what you're going to do. Using only natural materials, these can be leaves in your backyard, branches in the park, seashells on the beach, etc., whatever it might be. You will use creative problem solving to complete 3 earth sculptures to photograph and submit. So I give you some examples of Goldsworthy's below. After finishing the sculptures, photograph them and post the images in a blog entry. So this is done in a blog so that your peers can see them. So make sure after you submit, you go in and look at what your peers have done. You don't have to comment for credit, but I encourage you to comment on each other's posts. And then I want you to answer the following questions about your experience in making these sculptures. So 1, describe the experience of making them. How was it? Was it hard? Was it easy? What problems might you have encountered? Number 2, what was the most challenging part of creating these sculptures? 3, has doing this project, change the way you think about artists like Andy Goldsworthy? 4, if you could describe each sculpture with 1 word, what would it be and why? So we're kind of bringing that back, this whole idea of images and text. Are there any biblical scriptures that you can think of that would pair well with the images of your sculptures? So maybe be keeping that in mind as you're creating them, because I think that God speaks a lot about the natural world, and Scripture talks a lot about the natural world, so there might be something in there that you can pull out. Has this experience changed you anyway? Why or why not? And I don't mean changed you in some deep way. I mean, has it given you a new appreciation? Did it give you a mental break? What did it do for you? So again, 2 to 4 sentences in length for each of these, not a whole essay. This isn't meant to be a huge writing assignment, more of a reflective assignment. And so here are a couple just very basic examples of Goldsworthy's work and some of the things he's done. There's an interesting idea of temporality in his work, that it's fleeting, that you have to be there to experience it. So these are just a few very basic examples. When you watch this documentary, you're going to get a much better idea of what his work is like. So do enjoy that. I think that you'll enjoy Goldsworthy. Okay, so that's kind of your mental break, get out in nature, and then we do have a big writing assignment this week. I did actually cancel. You had a reflect journal. That is gone. So there was a journal that you were going to do all about heterotopias, and guess what? I took that out. So you have 1 less assignment to worry about this week. So this is the film review. Remember, last week I suggested that you pick a film, watch it, and take notes. This is a 6 to 8 page paper, just like the theory application paper was. Remember, you only have to pick 1 of these films to watch, and you're going to be considering a number of cultural factors relevant to each film. So this is intended to be a critical review, so the emphasis should be on the questions proposed in the prompt, not on opinion, and not on giving me a 6-page summary of a film. I've seen all of these films multiple times. I don't need you to tell me every detail of what happened from beginning to end. That's not what I'm after. It's okay to include a 1 to 2 page summary in that 6 to 8 pages at the beginning, but if the bulk of your paper is summary and then a small percentage is analysis, that's not going to be really what I'm looking for. So make sure you're using the bulk of your paper to analyze and to review these films based on the questions that I'm giving you. So if you chose The Passion of the Christ, these are the things I want you to think about. This has a lot to do with authorship and interpretation, this film. So number 1, how does the new media of film affect the delivery of a timeless story? So we have a timeless story from Scripture and a very new method of delivering it. So we've been talking about that throughout the last couple of weeks. So I want you to consider camera angles, montage scenes, flashbacks. Give a minimum of 3 examples how this new media of film is specifically being used to tell this story. So how can film tell this story in a way that text can't, that a play couldn't, that an oral telling of it couldn't? What is the theme of the story? Consider rise, climax, and fall of action. How do these thematic elements influence the audience's perspective? How does the idea of authorship, so authorship of Scripture, and then interpretation by Mel Gibson, who was the director of the film, play into storytelling in his interpretation of scripture, because ultimately we're seeing an interpretation. We're seeing an artistic interpretation of this story. So what artistic liberties are taken? I want you to give at least 3 examples of elements that are found in the film that are not found in scripture and what those do for that storyline. And number 4, who was the target audience for this film and why? So really think about that. Maybe do a little research on that. Who was Mel Gibson targeting? Was there a specific target audience? Was it a very broad audience? So look into that. So the next film choice is a documentary called Food Inc. And these are the things to think about. Number 1, the average supermarket has an average of actually over 40,000 products on their shelves at any given time. So I want you to look at the fact that those products are made up of a very small number of ingredients, and consider this idea of an illusion of choice. And this all has to do with the visual. It's driven by visual elements, that we can basically take a product and package it in a billion different ways and give this illusion of having a choice when we're actually choosing the same thing, aren't we? So give at least 3 examples from the film that illustrates this idea. Number 2, how do the structures of power in the food industry and advertising, so this one has a lot to do with advertising, this prompt, affect the everyday culture of America? Consider not just what we eat, but the process that goes into making our food. So how does all of that structure of power, how does that influence the way that we consume in this country? Think about from raising livestock to employees, farm to market, all of those steps that go into this, and how the visual sometimes skews that a little bit. Number 3, how is the visual used as a tool to glorify the food industry? So that's an interesting one. Think of a package that has a beautiful landscape on it, and you kind of assume that this, I think they use the example in the very beginning, there's butter. And, it's this beautiful farm, and you think these cows are roaming on this perfect picturesque farm, and that we're kind of glorifying that that's where your food is coming from. And is that necessarily true? How else is the visual used to glorify the food industry? Think of the fast food industry specifically. And number 4, consider the icons of the food industry and how they impact our daily life. And just because you might not consume something, the film does a very good job of showing us that even if you're not directly consuming something, that the power of these icons impact the way that food is produced overall. So what moral obligations do the food industry have to their customers? So this one is very much visually driven, but there's a lot of ethical issues that go on. So this is for those of you who really like to dig into those ethical issues. And then we have Up by Disney Pixar. A lot of students choose this prompt because they think, oh, it's a cartoon, this is going to be the easiest prompt. It's not, and I will tell you that I almost grade this one the hardest because this one has a lot of theory involved in it. So, number 1, I want you to describe how this film illustrates the idea that film is first a visual medium. Consider how the opening sequence has no dialogue at all. So there's that little bit of dialogue in the beginning. And then there's that whole section where there's just music, and it's a montage of the couple's lives, right? And so how is this a powerful storytelling device to give this montage scene with no dialogue? What does it do for us? How does it pull on our heartstrings? All of that. So number 2, this is where the theory comes in. This is where you're going to have to do some research. Don't just give me the dictionary definition of this word. So what is nostalgia? I want you to really look and dig into this concept. I don't like it when Webster's dictionary defines nostalgia as. That's such a very, very, very basic definition. I want you to dig. I'm going to keep reiterating that. So how is the concept of nostalgia present in this film? And why is nostalgia so powerful on the American psyche? Keywords, American psyche. I want you to really consider that specifically, this idea of Americana and how this film is really focusing on that. How is symbolism present in the film? So be specific here. Give at least 3 examples from the film. Why are these symbols important to the characters, and what is their function in the story? Because there are a lot of symbols here that drive the story along and that kind of give the morals and themes. So number 4, all Pixar films deviate from reality. How does Up? So how does the film give the viewer a sense of magic? even though there is no magic, there's no wave of a wand, there's no spell. And this is throughout all Pixar films. Think Monsters, Inc. It's just, they don't make any excuses. This is a world of monsters. Toy Story, toys come to life. There's no magic that goes into it that someone is doing to make them come to life. It's just this idea of deviating from reality and giving this overall sense of magic. So how is this present in this story? So those are your 3 prompts for your film review. If you have any questions about any of them, please let me know. I'm more than happy to discuss them with you on a deeper level. And then you have your quiz. I will tell you your quiz is all the questions are about your reading, about the Heterotopias. And that's what you got going on this week. Any comments, questions, concerns about grades, anything going on this week, please don't hesitate to ask, and have a wonderful, wonderful week.